So, as you know, tomorrow Mortal Kombat comes out in theaters and HBO Max. You have it. So, decided to rank my favorite all the Mortal Kombat games in my least to favorite order. And here's a little cameo by Hudson. Say hi, Hudson. All right. So, my least favorite Mortal Kombat would probably have to be Mortal Kombat 4. You know, the one came out in 1997, the first 3D Mortal Kombat game. Looking back, even back then, it was kind of a dud. And now in 2021, I don't think anybody thinks fondly of it. The only thing people really like about it is, introduce Quan Chi and Shinnok and like the weapon stuff. But other than that, it's kind of a forgettable game. Okay, then now number 10 will probably have to be Mortal Kombat Armageddon. You know, the one that has 64 fighters in it. It was a weird game because it was kind of bloated, but was also kind of thin at the same time. So I guess it was nothing but fat. There was no lean meat to it. And I don't think anybody thinks about that one finally either. Like, it had a lot of good stuff to it, but that creative fatality mode they had was a total bust. I know why they did it, but still just didn't work. Okay, now for number 9. This is going to get controversial. I know some of you guys are going to freak out because you freak out about fictional characters way too much and get way into your feelings about them. Will have to be Mortal Kombat 3 or Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Now, that's not like a bad game, but honestly, it just never clicked with me like that. Other than like some of the new characters like Sindel and Nightwolf, I don't think finally a Mortal Kombat 3. It just never worked for me. Okay, here's another controversial one, but it's having to be Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe or Mortal Kombat 8. Now, I know people don't like that game because there's no fatalities. It's rated T for teen, but there are fatalities and all that, but it's not blood or excessive gore. But it's a fun game, and everything we like about Mortal Kombat nowadays kind of started in that game. Okay, so after that, now I'll have to say my next favorite Mortal Kombat game had to be Deadly Alliance. That was the first one for the PS2 era. It was pretty cool, It was a year, like 5 years after Mortal Kombat 4 came out. So it was a nice little rehash, reboot of the series. But in retrospect, it has some flaws. But the next game, that's when it like really perfects it. All right, so next on the list will probably have to be the very first Mortal Kombat game. You know, the one that came out in 1992. The one with, like, was it 7 fighters? That's not. I gotta put in perspective. It's not like the best game, but in terms of importance and all that, it was. I think it is where it needs to be. And plus, you can't beat the feeling you got when you first saw Goro, that big, was he, forearm claymation, half man, half dragon thing. I mean, kids in arcades are always talking about that. Then you actually got to that point, you're like, nah, man, this ain't it, Chief. So next on the list will probably have to be Mortal Kombat Deception, the one that came out to Deadly Alliance. Now, I think that was the perfect match, perfect game of the PS2 era, at least the Mortal Kombat games. Cause I think Deadly Alliance got off on the right foot, but then Armageddon kind of fumbled. But Deception was a good blend, had good fighters, good cast, and I think that's the start of the story mode, or as they called it at the time, the conquest mode, which never fully gelled, but hey, at least they were trying something different. Okay, now finally, get to Mortal Kombat 2. I think that was the best game of the first 3 games. It, introduced one of my favorites, Kung Lao, made Raiden a beast, and I don't know, I think it was just a perfect game. I mean, Jax wasn't all of that in that game, but it had great stage. It had Baraka, and it had like the best character, Katana. The only thing I didn't like is how Sonya got relegated to the side, but I know why they did that. Okay, now we're in the top 3, and I would say number 3 would have to be Mortal Kombat X. That one, I don't know what doesn't really click with it for me, but it just never. It was a good game. And I like the combat kids, Johnny Cage's kid and Jax's kid and all the other kids and new characters. But the story was kind of all over the place for me. I mean, I did like how they did with Johnny Cage. Johnny Cage became one of my favorite characters with that game. Maybe it was the aesthetic. It was like horror inspired. It had good DLC characters that like all these horror icons like Jason Voorhees, the Predator, the Xenomorph from Aliens, But like I said, it's not a bad game, but it's not one I really look back on fondly either. And now number two would have to be Mortal Kombat in 2011, or Mortal Kombat 9 as it's retroactively called. That was like the reboot of the franchise. I'm a big story person. Story games are kind of my stuff, so that's why fighting games never really clicked with me. But that was like the first fighting game to have like a really good story mode. It had all the classics from the first three games, and some other characters. Like, I had a PS3, so it had Kratos on it, and Kratos is one of my favorite video game characters. And it was a good mix of all the classic Mortal Kombat stuff, but with enough new stuff to push it into the next generation. And like I said, the story mode was really good. It took some chances, which I think a lot more video games should do. Like, they made Liu Kang and Raiden kind of bad guys in that game, or at least not ideal. So I was like, yeah, I have fond memories of that one. Alright, so finally, I think the best Mortal Kombat game would have to be Mortal Kombat 11, the one that came out in 2019, including its DLC, Aftermath. That's probably one of my favorite games of all time. And I think it was a really good conclusion to the story, because I have a feeling they're gonna, maybe not end Mortal Kombat, but the next one's gonna be way different. We're not gonna see anybody. It has good guest characters like RoboCop and Rambo and the Terminator and Joker of all people, and has great stages. And like I said, once again, the story plus the Aftermath DLC really concludes the story. And I think NetherRealm Studios did a really good job, if this is the last one, at least as we know it. Yeah, so I think that's probably my top, how I rank the Mortal Kombat franchise. 11 was the least favorite. Other than that, I think it's one of my favorite series, and I can't wait to see the new movie, even though I've technically seen it, but I can't say anything until actually 5 p.m. April 20, what day is it? April 20, whatever today is, 5 p.m. today. I can't really say anything until then.